Okay. Good evening and welcome to this remote meeting of Wirral Planning Committee. My name is Stuart Kelly. I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the council website. For those people at home who are viewing the webcast, if you look above the meeting, you will see a resources tab. Select this and the link to the agenda will appear on the right-hand side. This will enable you to open the agenda reports as PDF documents and follow the discussion. My role is to ensure that the committee runs smoothly, having regard to procedure, behaviour and ethics. To explain who are with us online: planning officers, a highway engineer and an environmental health officer. They will present the applications and provide any technical advice that may be required. The council solicitor. She will give advice to the committee on procedural and legal matters that may arise. There is also the minute taker and of course IT support. The elected members will consider the applications and collectively make the decisions. Voting will be by roll call. Each application will be introduced by the planning officers. Where there is a qualifying petition of 25 signatures or more, I will invite a representative of the petitioners to address the committee for 5 minutes. I will then invite the applicant or their agent to address the committee for 5 minutes. Statutory and local consultees may also address the committee, and a ward councillor can also address the committee. Once representations have been made and following any questions of clarification from the committee, the speaker may not participate in any debate that follows within the committee. The application will then be open to debate and discussion by members, and we will then make a decision on the application. When making decisions, members may only have regard to material planning considerations. It is a matter for each member individually to balance these considerations and to decide what weight to give them. Members will also have regard to local planning policies and to the National Planning Policy Framework and guidance. Members of the committee must not predetermine any matter which comes to the committee for decision. However, it is permissible for committee members to be predisposed towards a particular outcome with regards to an application, provided they don't make up their minds on how to vote before formally considering the application details, listening to the presentations and the full debate of committee. Members must have listened to the debate and considered all the facts before deciding whether or not to move any motion. If a member is minded to put a motion to the committee, it is good practice to first seek advice from the planning officer on the wording of a potential motion. The order of tonight's agenda will be varied. A reminder for members: keep your microphone muted and your camera off until called to speak. Ensure that the chat function is available to you. Indicate that you want to speak by typing your request into the chat function. Turn on your camera and microphone prior to speaking. Turn them off again when you have finished. When a vote is taken, the solicitor will call your name. We now need to just check all members are present and their equipment is working correctly. When I call your name, could you turn on your camera and then your microphone and confirm, please? So we'll start then. Check Bruce Berry. Bruce.
Yeah, good evening, Chair. I'm here.
Thanks, Bruce. Andy Corkhill.
Yeah, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Andy. George Davies.
Yes. Sorry, Stuart, I'm losing my microphone there. It's Councillor George Davies, and yes, I'm here and present.
And thank you. I'm working off an old list. I'll go with Pat Cleary.
Yeah, Pat Cleary in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, beg your pardon, Pat. Steve Foulkes.
Yes, in attendance. And just to remind committee, Brian Kenny is not available tonight and couldn't get a deputy. So.
Thanks for that, Steve. Samantha Frost.
Hi, good evening, Chair.
Hi, Samantha. Kathy Hodson.
All present and correct, Chair.
I don't think we saw you, Kathy. Perhaps we go back to just go back to Kathy, make sure the camera is working. They're sitting in the dark. Thanks.
Present and correct.
Mary Jordan.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. Ian Lewis.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Ian Lewis present, and I can hear and see on the IT.
Excellent. Paul Stuart.
Councillor Paul Stuart. Good evening, Chair. Everything's working fine.
Thank you. Stuart Whittingham.
Yeah, all present, correct.
Thank you. And Irene Williams.
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks, Irene. Okay. First item on our agenda then is to approve the accuracy of the minutes held of the meeting held on the 25th of August. Just get me on shuffle. Excellent. Okay, we'll take those as read then. Item 2 is the Members' Code of Conduct, Declaration of Interest. Members of the committee are asked whether they have any personal or prejudicial interests in connection with any application on the agenda, and if so, to declare them and to state the nature of the interest. Okay, thanks for that. We're just going to vary the order then. We have objectors, petitioners and a ward councillor in attendance for item 5. Which is the application of the solar campus 235 Leasowe Road, Wallasey. So we'll move to that one first, and I'll just ask the planning officers now to introduce that report. Okay, thanks, Matthew. The plan is on the screen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for the installation of an additional 3G sports pitch with external floodlighting. The additional pitch would be located on the eastern boundary of the site, adjacent to existing pitches and adjacent to the A554 dual carriageway. So this is the new pitch here. The additional pitch is not considered to represent a detrimental impact on the openness of the greenbelt, given the existing use of the site for sports facilities. The floodlights are sited between 150 and 250 metres away from the nearest residential properties, and a condition is in place to deal with beam orientation, lux levels, light spill, and hours of operation. The red dots represent the positions of the floodlights. If I go back, so this is the nearest one here, which will be facing downwards onto the pitch. That's 150 metres away from this point here, and the furthest one away is this one, which is, as I say, 250 50 metres away. So there is a qualifying petition of objection in connection with this application, and the application is recommended for approval.
Okay. Thanks for that. Mr. Cockcroft, if you can turn your camera and microphone on. Excellent. Victoria, do you have the material that is that okay with you, Mr. Cockcroft?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, now if I just say move on the slides, that'll be great. Thank you.
That's excellent. Okay, so you have 5 minutes, and I'll interject when you have about 1 minute left to go. So if you can start your presentations, thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you. I'm trying to represent the residents of Leasowe Road and Hayes Drive. We feel that the site at present is not fit for purpose, and granting further usage would exaggerate the issues. So there's 4 things that I want to try and raise tonight. The first one and the main one is the traffic, but I'll discuss that in a bit more detail. 2 are the hours of operation. We feel they're excessive. We already have nuisance from 6 in the morning, and and now TRFC want to operate well past 10 o'clock at night, 7 days per week. The site is currently unsecure. The only boundary separating users and people congregating is actually our fences to our gardens. We're subject to antisocial behaviour, and obviously this is going to extend matters even further. Point 3, light and noise pollution. We've never been privy to any light look surveys, and even though the planning office have shown the positions on the pitch, there are still floodlights to be on the walkway and the proposed car parking, which is a lot closer than 150 metres. Same with noise levels. At the moment it's tolerable because the general hours of the football are between 9 to 5. But if this goes on further into the night, obviously with the local environment quieting down, we're going to get a lot more noise pollution. It'll be a lot more noticeable. And again, we've not been privy to any decibel or noise surveys, despite requesting those on numerous occasions. Point 4, we feel that the actions and the engagement from planning officers has been at best negligent. The lack of detail and consultation is quite frankly appalling. We've asked for numerous consultations and further details to try and work with the committee on a solution, but nothing's been forthcoming so far. Catherine, can you move the slide on, please? So just to talk about the traffic, I mean, the actual pitch, we don't really have an issue with the pitch. It's getting to and from the pitch. The current site is not fit for purpose. Leasowe Road is an accident hotspot. And as you can see, we've done a bit of a risk assessment showing the entry and exit from the site is not fit for two vehicles. So currently, if there's a vehicle coming out and somebody's trying to pull in, they have to stop and reverse back onto the main road. Now, the proposals that have been put forward will also put coach parking bays on one of the lanes of Leasowe Road, which will just, again, exaggerate the traffic problem even further. What it also shows is that the entry is not segregated. It has users on cycles and pedestrians, and we feel it is really, really dangerous. There's been no thought to segregate it. That route is also the only route for emergency vehicles to attend site. Could you please move the slide on, Catherine? So this extract is actually from Wirral Council's website and shows the previous application from about 5 years ago, and it clearly stipulates on there as one of the conditions enforced by Wirral Council that there should be a two-way access system to improve Leasowe Road. This is your own expert recommendations from the Highways Authority that are still not being adapted or adhered to some 5 years on. Can you please move on? So we understand as residents that Wirral Council have already entered into a commercial agreement with Tramley Rovers, but there's been nothing open and transparent to us as residents. We've requested consultations and detailed plans, and as I said before, these have been either dismissed or ignored, and this has been going on since February. We do welcome the investment into the community, but that shouldn't be at a detriment to the safety and the well-being of the residents on site. Next slide, please.
You have 1 minute left.
Okay. The closing view. It's within your gift today to do the right thing. You can ignore the facts that have been put in front of you in this limited time today. But you will have blood on your hands if you agree with this. It's not a matter of if an accident occurs, it's just when an accident will occur. This site in its current format and current proposal is not safe and not fit for purpose. Can we not delay or postpone the application until a suitable proposition has been put forward, which we as residents will gladly assist with? And again, I'm more than happy to be challenged on any of the points I've tried to put forward today, if you feel they're unfair or unreasonable. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thanks for that. Thanks. I'm just going to ask if there's any members of the committee have any questions or clarification they would want to put to Mr. Cockcroft. Anybody, any questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
just a point to make.
If you want.
Okay, I'll take Steve. Steve, you're the senior member. I'll take Steve, then I'll take Stuart, then I'll take Bruce.
Yeah.
Can I remind members really to use the chat box?
I do
It's easier for me to follow, if nothing else. Okay, Steve.
Just you said lack of consultation. I've been in touch with some of the ward councillors prior to this application, and apparently a public meeting was arranged prior to COVID lockdown, and Tranmere Rovers or the applicant were represented at the meeting. Is that factual that there was a public meeting took place?
There was a public meeting. I would call it more of a marketing meeting from TRFC, to be fair. And following that meeting, we left all our details, email addresses, phone numbers, and we've had little consultation or feedback ever since. There was also a flyer that was put round probably about 3 weeks ago, but to be fair, the details were that scant, and it was literally the picture was the size of a postage stamp. So from there, we've been trying to deal with local councillors to get a bit more information and explain some of the reasonings to it, which hasn't been forthcoming so far, I'm afraid.
Well, okay. The evidence I've received is contrary that the local council have been engaging quite actively with the COVID restrictions. And final question is, you've put in very large red letters the word corruption. I don't think that's helped your case in any way. Have you any evidence of corruption, or have you've just thrown it in there for any particular reason?
Well, how can the highways team deem this as not a risk? I have no objection to it when at the current
I'll
state.
repeat again. Have you any evidence of corruption?
Not firm corruption, but
I'll take that as a no. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to hear from a ward councillor once we've heard from the applicants, and no doubt members will have questions to ask the highways officers in a moment. Stuart, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I must say I found it a bit strange to be presented with a presentation as opposed to, evidence regarding the site's access, photographs and what have you. And I agree with Steve's points. I found the assertion on the last slide offensive. If you're not suggesting that ourselves as a plan committee either corrupt or negligent, if you want to withdraw that, I'd welcome that. But if you've got the evidence to back that up, I suggest you go to the relevant authorities. I'm not suggesting the planning committee is corrupt. I'm just saying some of the reports have been scant, bordering on negligent. And from our point of view, it's been frustrating trying to get evidence and factual surveys from the planning team, and we've just been hit with brick walls. So, that's why we have a feeling something's going on underlying. We do know there's been a partnership agreement entered into, and that's fine, and we welcome the investment, but, share with us the reasons why you think this should be approved. That's all we were trying to say. Yeah, maybe a bit hasty putting the word corruption in. I will withdraw that, but...
Okay. Bruce, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, good evening, Mr. Cockcroft. I was just wondering about the parking on site. I visited the site myself this afternoon and had a look around at the parking facilities at present. And from what you said, the site is currently in use 9 till 5 at present. Is that correct?
There's people in from 6 in the morning, but it's very limited numbers. The general sports side of it's about 9 o'clock, yeah.
Okay, so basically 9 till 5. And I counted 27 parking spaces on the site today when I was there. So that the photographs that you've shown us where there are vehicles parked. I think there was 3 or 4 parked alongside of your property on the grass verge.
Yeah.
And one was parked on the opposite side of the service road. Now, are those vehicles being parked there because all 27 parking spaces are occupied?
Not normally, yeah. I mean, it's obviously a lot quieter at the moment with COVID, and obviously the football season not fully into the swing. But generally, the car park is full up, and right the way down Leasowe Road towards the exit or the entry from the motorway is generally filled up as well. So we get people parking on the curbs, people parking right down the side of the houses, and then round in Hayes Drive as well. But I do thank you for coming out today and having a look at that as well. That's much appreciated.
Okay, thanks for your answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. If you could lower your hand and use the chat function in the future, that'd be great.
Okay.
Any other members, any questions? Okay. Mr. Corkhill, thank you for your presentation, and I'll now ask Dawn Torcher to turn on her camera and mic. Okay, I think we can hear you.
Okay, is that ready?
Okay, so yes, just like the objector, you have 5 minutes to address us as the applicant.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I mean, I think I'll just try and pick up on a couple of the specific points that have been mentioned. Firstly, the partnership agreement isn't a commercial agreement with the council. That came about based on the work that the club's doing towards the council strategy. So to make reference to the 2020 vision, there was evidence provided before that partnership agreement that the club's working against 17 of those, which are predominantly around community, education, the economy. So that's the partnership. It's not a commercial arrangement. If I can just give a bit of a driver why this application's been put in, one of the parts of our strategy as a club is to develop community assets. And we had the likes of Prenton Park, the Riverhill Hotel, we've taken on Beechwood in that area, and we've tried to do the same with the campus and make it a community asset and how that can benefit the community. And that's the reason for putting in this application. We all know the problems that unfortunately the weather is causing us at the moment, and the grass pitches, the statistics on football being cancelled, activities being cancelled is higher, and it's getting higher, and we'll probably anticipate another year of it. We worked with the local authority and the Football Foundation and the local FA on a local development plan, which identified that just to meet the need of the current provision, there's 13 additional 3Gs required in the Wirral. And that again was part of why we've submitted this. The issues that have been raised, I mean, just if I can clarify on the usage isn't till 5 o'clock at the moment. So I left the site at 8 o'clock last night, and there was football activity on till then. So that's a positive. If that's not being noticed, we are managing it. And that's an example, that activity that took place last night is probably what would take place on the 3G. It would just not be on the grass pitch, it would be on the 3G provision instead. So some of the activity that would be going on is already on there at the moment. It's just, as I say, the grass pitches and the weather make it difficult to keep running. The traffic management will work with the council, will work with the residents, whatever is required to make that work. At the moment, I haven't seen as heavy parking as been described, and I'm there probably most days. So, but again, we'll work within the guidance. Security, we haven't had many issues on antisocial behaviour. We've put in fob systems, we've put in improved gates, and again, whatever's required, we can work around that. If this is accepted and this proposal goes ahead, we will increase the staffing, and that was as part of the planning for this. We will increase the staffing and the security. What we've also found, and we did ahead of the previous planning application, we've tried to engage with the agencies as much as we can. Particularly a lot of our work is for young people, and we think that's one of the reasons we haven't had as much antisocial behaviour, because we run a massive education provision and we have that positive engagement. And the feedback we got through this was a real will and support from the grassroots clubs to make this happen, because again, they're having the problems around pitches and weather. I probably receive on an average monthly basis 6 or 7 requests from people, residents, clubs in that area. Please, can you help us with facilities? That was pre-COVID. as we're coming post-COVID now, I think it's highlighted the more important element of why young people need that regular football, they need that activity. In terms of the hours of usage, the later elements would not be for young people, they would not be for children. As with our other assets, such as the recreation centre at Prenton Park, we're very careful to follow safeguarding and procedures, so there's cut-off points through the evening of what ages of children carry on playing. We'd anticipate the later slots being adults, and what we know from what our own procedures would be and market research and talking to other facilities, as they finish playing, they get in the car and they go home. But there tend to be adults who either work shifts or their evenings are taken up with their children's provision.
Dawn, you have 1 minute left.
Okay. The surveys we've been asked to carry out, we have carried out, and they can be shared within guidance. So that's it really. I think it's more sort of we will work to make this safe and make this work, as we are with all the other elements. You know, it's every bit of our work, even like fans return to the stadium, we're making sure it's as safe and as secure as possible for people. But I think I just wanted to really highlight sort of the need for this planning application and why we want to do it.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll just ask if there's any members who have any questions. Pat Cleary, quick in there, man.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Dawn, for the presentation. I've got 3 questions for you, if I may. Obviously, a lot of the concerns by residents are related to traffic and parking. I'm just wondering, do you have a travel plan in place at all that encourages staff or visitors to the site to use public transport, cycling, walking? And related to that, are there any kind of cycle parking facilities on the site?
No, there isn't. It's sorry, Pat.
Hello. I just finished my questions and you can come in if that's okay. Yeah. My last question was the report refers to the removal of trees and shrubs as part of the work that will take place, but there's no reference to replacing or replanting. So just wonder, did you have any intention to replace or replant the trees and shrubs that will be removed? Thank you.
Yeah. In terms of the traffic, again, that's something that we would work through. I'm just working on, I know we've had this conversation before, for Prenton Park, for the campus and for Beechwood, on a pot of funding to put in cycle provision for people to be able to travel there. Our students, for example, that come in the day, even the ones that reach an age of driving, they have to request special permission to bring a car. We encourage them to use the trains and the buses as much as possible. So yeah, that's something we will continue to work through. And I think if anything post-COVID, it is something that will probably push on with more for reasons that everyone's dealing with at the moment. In terms of the replacement, yes, in terms of the aesthetics and also the basis of the site, that has been talked about. I couldn't give you details on the plan, but I can get them and send them through if that helps.
Yeah, could I just follow on, Chair? Yeah, thanks for that, Dawn. That would be very welcome if you could follow up with that. But just to clarify, there's no physical restrictions to provide cycle parking provision on site, is there? There is the physical space to do it.
Yes, we currently we use things at the moment, like we've put a container in, so it's not ideal, but for the young people we've put a container in and they put their cycles in there, but that's just something that we'd like to build on. And I think the way we've looked at the space, there is more room around the other side of the building to do that.
Okay. Ian Lewis, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to Mr. Cockcroft and to Dawn for their comments so far. Dawn, I've got a couple of points. If you can perhaps help me out here a bit. 4 or 5 years ago, when I was the councillor for this local area, I don't think it was with yourself, but it was with other colleagues from Tranmere Rovers, where we had a number of discussions about the potential impact of the pitches that are there now on the people in Hayes Drive. And there was, I recollect, there was certainly a commitment by Tranmere Rovers to work with the residents of Hayes Drive and that part of Leasowe Road, either informally or with a formalised liaison committee, I think is what it was called at the time, to try and deal with some of the issues that we expected to arise from that application. So I'd be interested to know if that was ever put into practice. and what sort of communication you have had with the residents of Hayes Drive and Leasowe Road, notwithstanding the reference to the public meeting that was made earlier on by Mr Cockcroft and Councillor Foulkes. A couple of other points, if I can, Dawn, rather than going backwards and forwards, if that's okay, and if that's okay with you. Mention has been made by Mr Cockcroft and I think by Councillor Berry in terms of the parking spaces on the site. I also went down today. I didn't go on the site, but I walked past the site, and there were a number of vehicles parked on Leasowe Road, where clearly if you're coming off the motorway and you're turning left to get towards Leasowe, it's quite a narrow space for car parking vehicles. I am concerned about the likelihood that if you're providing extra facilities, there will by definition be additional vehicles, and as Councillor Cleary has mentioned, additional cycles. You've answered the point about cycles, but I'm not clear in terms of the parking, where you're expecting people to park. And is that in close proximity to the houses on Hayes Drive, who, as we saw from the graphic put up by Mr Cockcroft, already have vehicles at the back of their homes? And the other one really is in terms of the traffic coming out of the site. It has to turn left because it's a dual carriageway, so the traffic has to turn left, and the traffic increasingly turns right at the junction with Hayes Drive onto Leasowe Road, causing problems for motorists in both directions. Have you had any conversations with the Highways Department in terms of trying to mitigate those effects, please? They're my points. Sure.
Okay, so if I just come on to the dialogue with Hayes Drive, when the point that you're referring to a few years ago, we did keep up some engagement. So we did things like we invited children who are residents in that road to come into Tranmere for a game, a little bit of football activity and some food, and that was sort of as a kind of, we realised there'd been some disruption based on the work we've been doing there, so that was to sort of build them relationships. The ongoing dialogue has predominantly been through the local councillors in that area. I can't say I've honestly had much dialogue myself, and I'm not sure that other colleagues have, but we probably communicate with the local councillors at least once a month. So that's how that dialogue's been maintained. I also, like Councillor Foulkes, had a different feedback on the public meeting in terms of how that went and what the purpose of that was about. So that was kind of in response to that one. In terms of the traffic on Leasowe Road, the only thing I would ask also is there any evidence that it is directly from Tranmere Rovers? The reason I say that is we equally have problems with our car park. So I myself have been there where you've come to lock up overnight and there's 4 or 5 cars in the car park, and they've either come from the council building next door, they've come from people visiting one of the agencies next door, and we've been, so that's the only bit. It is a busy area, and I'm not sure whether they are all identified to users of Tranmere Rovers. And in terms of the turning right, I haven't directly had any conversations with Highways. I think it has been discussed. The only thing I can probably say on that is we've put in strong disciplines within our own staffing and our own users. So, for example, if anyone who works for the club is seen using that right turn, it's a dismissal. It's a disciplinary process. And we have reiterated that. So that's just something we're trying to manage as well. Is that addressing?
Chair, can I come back? Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for your answers, Dawn. I think it would be helpful, having heard from Mr Cockcroft, clearly he is representing a number of neighbours of the site. I would urge Tranmere to formalise the arrangements of how they liaise with the residents directly. I think that would be in your benefit and certainly in theirs. When issues arise, it stops it getting any further. And just as an idea maybe to help you with your neighbours, nothing to do with planning. In terms of the traffic use of the site, I get what you're saying in terms of there are vehicles using the site and they may not be yours, but to the residents that really doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter where the vehicles are, who the vehicles belong to or what they're doing. If they're using the site and causing an annoyance, that is an annoyance to residents, isn't it? So again, I would expect Tranmere to deal with that as an issue, regardless of whether it's people from the council. If it's people from the council building parking there, then that should be stopped. Because do you see what I mean? These kind of issues could have been resolved. These kind of issues could have been resolved with the residents directly, perhaps, rather than getting to this stage of the planning committee, maybe.
Yeah, and I take them 2 points on board. I personally will commit to being positive and working with the the local residents. Maybe we've gone through too many chains of communication, and if we can look to improve that, we definitely will. In terms of the other traffic and the users, yeah, again, I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, we did, if I can find records of, we put numerous notices out to staff in the council buildings saying, if you park in there, we're going to lock it up. You know, we kind of, because we've got the two problems of it takes up spaces, but then, I mean, again, personally, I've been there for an extra hour sometimes because you can't lock the building. So the only thing I can suggest there, again, is that it's something we're keen to work on as a partnership in that area. So whether that's a meeting with the residents ourselves and key people in the sites around there, that's something we can commit to doing.
Okay, thanks for that. Bruce Berry.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Don. My question is concerning the amount of pictures that you have. If this proposal goes ahead and the 3G pitch is built, you will, according to what I can say, I think you would have 6 grass pitches plus 1 3G pitch. Is that correct?
No. We'd have 4 grass pitches, and out of them 4, 2 of them are designated solely to the first team. No one else is allowed on them. So the hours of usage of them are predominantly 4 days a week from about 10 o'clock till 12:30. They're not used for any community, any education, any international programmes because, as you'd appreciate from a football point of view, they want to protect them. We then have another 3rd pitch which is used solely by another group at the moment. Their hours of usage are about 15 hours a week, and again that's exclusive use. And they have one other grass pitch which is currently used by our education and our youth, what people would know as scholars. And the hours of usage on that's more heavily used, and that is one that's used over weekend. What the diagram shows is a pitch at the back, a 5th one. That's just a grassed area for training that's used for like sort of ad hoc training, no pitches. As I said previously, what the 3G would create is transferring some of the current activity onto the 3G. So for example, last night there was a group of young people under 16s and some college provision and an under 12s elite group. Probably all that would transfer to the 3G. So it wouldn't be additional footfall evenings like last night. It would be transferring to protect the grass pitches. Because in an ideal world, the 4 we've got, we'd have the 2 for the first team, and our youth provision, the 16 to 18, would have their own designated pitch. We don't really want to share that with anyone else, but at the moment, to deliver our education and community as we want to in terms of strategy, we're having to use it.
You said earlier, Dawn, that I think you said there's a requirement for a further 13 3G pitches in the Wirral?
Yeah, that's the Wirral development plan.
Okay. And I know from experience from people, well, younger men that I know who do play football regular in the evenings. It's people that work, obviously, and they always play in the evenings, and they do struggle to get pitches. So I would imagine that if you've got 4 grass pitches in use, well, you could fill them if you wanted to, and I would imagine that that would be your incentive to fill them. What I wanted to know, sorry,
if I could just respond on that point, I must get, as I said before, requests weekly before COVID on use of them pitches, and we say no because we have to protect them for the use that they're currently there for. I could probably go out to advert tomorrow and we could probably fill them all night, every night, but we haven't done that because that's not the purpose of the original planning application and the purpose of the facility. And again, taking into account the points on board for reasons such as that have been raised, but also from our own internal protection of the building, protection of the grass, we wouldn't do that. Okay. If we were going to do that, we would have done it already.
Okay. Well, can you tell me how many pitches would you expect to be played at any one time?
In terms of throughout an average day?
Yeah.
So on an average day in the morning, there'd probably be 2 pitches in use. One will be the first team and one will be one of the other users. That's an average day. sort of through it. Of an evening at the moment, as I said, the 2 first team pitches will never be touched, and what we call pitch 3, which is the one nearer to Hayes Drive within our boundary, wouldn't be touched. So it would just be at the moment 1 in operation, and the training ground at the back, the training area.
I'm just trying to get an idea of how many people would be on site at one time. That is, people playing football and members of staff.
If I give you an example of an average day in the building, there's a first team squad of about 25. There's a youth squad with staff of about 20. And there's an education provision on an average day of about 20. That will not change based on this application. Of an evening, it's real mix depending on the days, and obviously we're in this period of getting back to normal, so to say, post-COVID. Average evening, there would probably be at maximum, currently, about 30 users in a given hour. And again, we wouldn't anticipate that changing due to this planning application. As I said, it's more about the activity being played on a 3G to provide consistency. As you say, clubs struggle for it to provide consistency and regular activity rather than using the grass pitches.
On the figures that you've just quoted, it's well over the capacity that you can provide in parking spaces, which I counted today 27.
Yeah, but of an evening, say sort of like the 30, like last night, there was probably about 12 cars there, because they come in groups as part of a football club. And the parking's something in terms of I haven't got the figures off the top of my head in terms of the plans for that, but that's something we can come back with.
Okay, thanks, Dawn. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Kathy, I'll bring you in to ask you a question of traffic. Ian, did I cut you off? Is this what you're complaining about, or are you coming back?
No, sorry, I wasn't complaining, Chair, not at all. It's only when Dawn was speaking, I was asking you if I could come back with some points that you've allowed me to do, so I have nothing else to ask Dawn.
I beg your pardon, man. It's in the wrong place. Mary Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. Dawn, you keep mentioning the post-COVID era. We're actually in anything but a post-COVID era. I've just come from a meeting with the Director of Public Health. There's a spike amongst the 20 to 29 age group. There's a very worrying spike amongst the 10 to 19 age group. The chances of them actually using public transport is going to be very remote. If they come to football at all, they'll be using cars. There will never be a post-COVID era. This is the normal until we get a vaccine.
Apologies. Probably just what I meant in terms of that is that when we were in complete lockdown and the club's gone through massive risk assessments and policies and procedures to make the environment as safe as possible. So the current users in terms of the first team returning, the scholars returning, and our education provision returning, 6 months ago, obviously that wasn't happening. What I mean in terms of the community use is there is a real will for people to be getting back to training, getting back to playing, and that's what I meant in reference to us receiving a lot of requests. Again, we're working with the local authority on that. Your grass pitches aren't open until the 26th of September, and we will work within them guidelines. I know from a daily basis things aren't going to go back to how it was, but I think it's just in terms of, specifically related to this application and the use of the building. The use of the building has increased since the restrictions were lifted.
Okay, thanks. I wonder if I could ask, Bushberry said he'd been to sites and he'd seen the cars parked adjacent to Mr. Cockcroft's property on the grass verge, and I've got Google Earth up, though the date's not there. Clearly it wasn't, yesterday or the day before. And there are indeed, even on Google Earth Street View, 3 cars parked right up to Mr. Cockcroft's back fence on the grass verge. That's quite antisocial, really, isn't it, of the management of the ground to allow car parking so close. Ultimately, I think the objectors are putting to us the case that they have existing issues along the boundary in terms of car parking, etc. And we'll explore the highway with the highways officers in a moment. And their case, I guess, is that more pictures will exacerbate this problem. Why does, in terms of the car parking management of the site, are you allowing such irresponsible car parking on grass verges adjacent to private property?
The ones that you're making reference to, is that the entrance before our gate?
It's the entrance immediately off the road, and looking on it, I can see the gable end of Mr. Cockroft's house. And there's a sign that says the campus, welcome to Tranmere Rovers Football Club. There's then a number of cones, and then at least 3 cars parked in between the tree boundary.
So when that's happened in certain days, we found them vehicles aren't related to our building. So that's where the relationship with the campus provision next door, or people, there's the antisocial behaviour team and MASH and various ones are there. So we've had numerous occasions where them cars have been there. We've gone round every user in our building, because it's normally daytime more than evening. I think you'll find that. I've not seen that of an evening, and I'm there quite a bit of a night. It tends to be more daytime usage, and that's where we've tried to work with the buildings next door. But I think unfortunately they also have people turning up as service users, so I think it does need resolving, but it's not a defence position. I don't think them cars are completely always attributed to our use of that area.
I see. So I mean, part of the residents' case is, the 3G pitch could well be Saturday, Sunday, more intensive use. So whilst there might be daytime parking while residents are at work or have you during the day, during the weekend, I think they have a concern. Anyway, I'll just put that.
Sorry, Stuart, if I could just answer that question. I mean, the other thing we have done over a weekend, and I'd be interested if there's any evidence against this, is we put stewards down there with a management plan in place. So when we've had fixtures on a Saturday for our youth team or anything like that, which again is similar sort of levels of usage, because we're only talking 1 3G pitch, it is similar sort of number of users. We always put stewards down there to manage. So that's why, again, I hope I'm not wrong, but I've never had reports of instances like that when it's been our use of the building of a weekend. The problem we tend to come across is daytime usage midweek because of the other buildings in the area.
Okay.
Which I don't know whether one of the conversations we've talked through is the potential use of the school with the closure of Emsley Morgan, whether that's an option, or whether, there's a way that as the neighbours in that area we can share the use better.
Okay, thanks for that. No other members have indicated. Mr. Cockroft, I see you have your hand up. Unfortunately, as I said in my opening remarks, once the presentations and questions have been asked by members, the objector and the applicants don't have the opportunity to come back. I do apologise. That's our standing orders. Dawn, thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Greenery, Carl, if you can turn on your... Carl, hi, you're the ward councillor. You've heard from the objectors and the applicant. If you could give us your perspective, we'd be grateful.
All right, thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee members. The first thing I would like to say and to stress is that as the ward member, I and my other ward members support Tranmere Rovers Football Club in the community, as do the majority of the local residents. And in principle, we would normally support the creation of the 3G pitches as a community benefit. But we have listened to the real concerns from the residents, despite what people might have said earlier, which is why I asked for the planning to be originally taken out of delegation, and which is why I'm taking the opportunity to present these local concerns to you this evening. You've already heard from the petitioner, who has very strongly presented the objections of the local people, which I would now like to support in 2 key areas, which are first, safety, in particular the single vehicle exits and entrance onto the increasingly congested Leasowe Road, and secondly the loss of the amenities to the residents. The solar campus, for those who know it and those who have visited, is a mishmash of a site made up of unused premises, derelict premises and old school buildings adapted to other uses. It has a single road access and exits into the proposed site, which is there now, which only allows for one vehicle in and out. And I would like to draw your attention to a previous planning application which has already been mentioned tonight, which is APP/14/00310, grant of planning permission of the 27th of the 3rd, 2015, that indicated that no part of the development shall be commenced until the scheme of works showing access improvements on Leasowe Road to allow for two-way traffic has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. This approved work shall be completed prior to the use of the access unless agreed in writing by the local planning authority. We have seen no evidence of this, which was suggested in the interests of highway safety, and to repeat, no part of the development shall be commenced until a scheme of works showing access from Leasowe Road to allow for two-way traffic has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority and the council's own policy, RE13. Therefore, this problem still exists as you consider this newer planning application before you this evening. The second major concern is loss of amenities created by this proposal by loss of privacy, excess noise, light pollution, security, and already heavy overparking in the neighbouring roads and on Leasowe Road, which will be added to by this application, where it would be in addition to an already approved planning consent, which was granted on the 27th of the 3rd, 15, and has now come into effect with the increase of 9 community football pitches on the next door site of Linksview playing fields. We have already heard from many residents already of the problems this is causing down there, and this planning proposal could worsen that. There was 3 games played at the last weekend on this Links playing field, and there was problems of 70 cars parked all over the area. When all the pitches are in use on this Links playing field, this will bring problems, we estimate, when all the pitches are taken up, of over 200 cars on Leasowe Road looking to park on Leasowe Road and surrounding residence roads. It is not difficult to see the cumulative effect of this planning application tonight, making a huge detrimental impact with further parking of cars, coaches and visiting players parked on Leasowe Road, and a single-use access to this site, which will create blocked access and exit from Solar Campus onto Leasowe Road, causing a major safety issue. Added to this is the issues that the residents of Leasowe Road by the entrance and the residents of Hayes Drive that back onto the Solar Campus already suffer with lack of privacy. Their property, for people who've been on this site, is on a significantly low plane in the Solar Complex, and it's already overlooked into their living rooms, kitchens and bedrooms by existing traffic. This can only be worsened by increased use of the Solar Complex and the late night use of the 3G pitches and the increased noise of players, cars, traffic, etc. And in addition to this, we have the potential of floodlight pollution into these local houses into the late night by these towers of light. It's therefore on this basis, and therefore supporting the concerns of the local residents, I would object to the planning application and ask the committee to consider refusal on major issues of safety and loss of amenities to local people. Thank you, Chair.
I do beg your pardon, I was muted. I was just inviting members of the committee if they have any questions of clarification for the councillor. Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Greeny, for your comments. You made reference at the beginning that you'd taken this application out of delegation and asked for it to come before the committee. I don't know whether you or one of the committee officers can advise, but on page 29 of the report for this item, it does say that the reason we've got this is because we've had a petition of 36 signatures and no mention is made of any councillor asking for this to come out of delegation. Have you seen that, or is that not your recollection of events?
I asked for a take health delegation some time ago. I can't remember the date or anything.
Okay. If we can move on then, you've rightly given quite a bit of reference to the highways issues, not least on Leasowe Road and the junction with Hayes Drive. Have you had any sort of assessment done in terms of your own mind? I'm not talking a formal assessment, but on page 31 of the report, there are a number of proposals put forward, which I would also question with the highways officer when we get to that point in the meeting. What's your view of the proposals in the report for dealing with some of the highways issues that you've mentioned? That's all I have to ask, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, which proposals are there?
I think Ian is referring to paragraph, section 3.9 of the report, 3.9.2, 3.9.3.
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt you. There are 4 specific proposals put forward under 3.93 on page 31. I'd be interested in your assessment as a ward councillor whether they would go any way to mitigating some of the effects that you've rightly highlighted tonight.
I haven't got that report in front of me, so I'm not aware of actually the issues you're talking about.
Okay. One is a residence parking scheme in Hayes Drive. One is double yellow lines on Leasowe Road at the sports pitch entrance. 2 advanced directional signs, one at the campus and one at the training pitch, and other minor improvements to the gap in the central reservation opposite Hayes Drive. I think they're the 4 bullet points briefly. I'm sure you've seen the report previously. So
I think the residence parking thing was just an idea that was flagged up, and I don't think it was going to go any further. And I'm surprised it's been put forward as a solution. I don't think, from speaking to the residents, that anybody in Hayes Drive would support that one iota. Leasowe Road, with the other issues, is a dangerous road, and it's a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit there that goes right past the solar complex. And the turning point, which is a no U-turn, is constantly used by people coming out of the solar complex who turn left onto Leasowe Road and then immediately turn right onto a no U-turn sign. And there is talk of actually narrowing that down, so you can't do that, but I don't think that's any solution at all neither.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Thank you for answering my question.
Okay, thanks for that. No other members have indicated. Councillor, thank you for your contribution. I think Kathy, have you put your hand up, Kathy, or not? Is that a mistake?
Well, Stuart, I did say I wanted to speak to Highways and Matthew.
That's right. So I was.
Do you want to come in now?
Well, you may as well. Do you want to speak to Matthew first? I was going to invite Carl to speak to us on the traffic issues.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask about that anyway. So
go on. You kick us off.
Right. Matthew, Councillor Greenie has also indicated that under Act 14.00310 that no part of the development should be commenced until a scheme of works showing access improvements for Leasowe Road to allow for two-way traffic has been submitted and approved. And it seems to me that for the residents, the biggest issue is the parking issue, in terms of there not being adequate parking on site, and then that allows for an overspill onto the road and in front of their homes. So could Matthew confirm that the condition set out under section 11 on that application has been carried out and adhered to? And also, going back to what Councillor Greenie has said, and also Councillor Ian Lewis made reference to section 393, and in particular the 4 additional improvements. Because under section 393, the highways engineers have stated that they have some concerns over vehicles being parked off-site. And under condition 6, which is for prior to first use, that the parking area that should be resurfaced and laid out for vehicles. And I was wondering whether or not these 4 areas under section 393, the residence parking scheme, double yellow lines, advanced direction signs and minor improvements to the gap in the central reserve opposite, can they be conditioned? Because I'm sure the residents would prefer to have all of that included, which I think would go some way to mitigating the parking problems. So firstly, the first thing was to Matthew on the previous application conditions being discharged, and also for the Highways Department, that if they already have concerns, can they confirm again under the previous application? Because my concern is that if the previous application's conditions haven't been discharged in terms of highways and the parking issue, even if we are to condition under condition 6 on this one and add anything else, is it likely that that would be carried out to the sufficiently and for the residents to be satisfied? Thanks.
Matthew, condition 11.
Thank you, through you, Chair. There was a discharge of conditions application submitted back in 2015. Yeah, it was a DIS 15294, which was dealt with by the case officer who dealt with the previous application for 1400310. And there's a note on that file that says that all pre-commencement conditions have been discharged. Condition 11 says no part of the development shall be commenced, so that is a pre-commencement condition. Without wishing to jump in on anything that Carl might say, I have seen correspondence that says that the minimum recommended carriageway width for two standard vehicles to pass one another is 4.1 metres, and the current access width is approximately 4.5 metres wide, and so that condition 11 on the previous permission has been satisfactorily addressed by the previous development, and that the current width of the access does permit two-way movement of vehicles. But it's probably, these are highways issues, so it may be better for Carl to elaborate on those. In terms of whether the details that can be set that are set out in paragraph 3.9.3, the 4 bullet points, these form part of grant funding which has been agreed with the council towards 50% of the 3G pitch, and those works will be carried out by the local highways authority as part of their annual. Again, it's something that Carl can pick up on, I think, but it forms part of their revenue or their grants or something. Carl can explain that in more detail. So I think it wouldn't be appropriate to condition it as part of the planning permission, as it's something that will be picked up by the Highways Authority.
Okay, Carl. To pick up Kathy's point, and then I'll ask members if they have any questions.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Through you, Chair. As Matthew's just indicated, the current access width is approximately 4.5 metres wide and permits two-way movement of vehicles. It is used as a shared access with both pedestrians and vehicles using it to gain access to the sports pitches. This is considered an acceptable arrangement due to the slow speed of turning vehicles into and out of the site, the clear visibility sight lines along the short internal shared section of carriageway, and the improvements to the access width. The need for additional car parking was reviewed, and as the development proposal was considered not to generate significant levels of additional traffic over and above those already being produced by the sports pitches, it was therefore appropriate that the existing facilities were deemed sufficient for the parking demands. It was, however, identified that improvements to the internal surfacing of the car park would be needed to make the facility more attractive for use and to bring the parked vehicles currently on Leasowe Road associated with the sports pitches back within curtilage. To help reduce the impact from the current use on site, which it is considered will be extended over a greater period of time, it was also considered appropriate for further highway interventions, these being a scheme to enable residents parking to Hayes Drive and the dwellings fronting Leasowe Road, the provision of WL lines to the site access to maintain visibility along Leasowe Road, together with directional signage and road markings to help enforce the existing prohibition of U-turn within the Leasowe Road Central Reserve Hayes Drive junction. A single coach parking bay is also proposed to cater for coaches dropping off or picking up at the sports pitches. In terms of accessibility, the single coach parking bay provides a satisfactory facility and a controlled place for the coaches to stop when visiting the development. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of the only thing I didn't quite follow, I think, in terms of the highway safety there, Carl, is you're proposing in any event to put yellow lines on Leasowe Road to maintain visibility, whilst at the same time suggesting the coaches are able to park. So won't the coaches form a problem for visibility for exiting vehicles?
No, the proposed coach bay will be positioned away from the site access. It's just immediately after the existing bus stop. So the WL lines would still cover the required sight lines and accord with the standards. So it wouldn't harm the visibility of coming out the site access.
Okay. Those 4 bullet points are within our control, and they're something you were minded to take forward as highway safety issues in any event. The only thing we're conditioning then is the issue of the additional or improved car parking on site to make it more attractive. How many spaces are we talking about there?
It's approximately additional 30 to 40 spaces. You can actually see it on the Google overview. I think Councillor Berry mentioned the car parking area earlier. Approximately 27 spaces are marked out, but there's an uneven surface area immediately south of that, which we're recommending is surfaced, which would provide additional capacity on site.
Okay. Any other members, any questions for Carl, the highway engineer? Ian, is that you? Yes, Ian.
Yeah, Ian? Please, if I may. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Carl, for your overview of the issues. I have to be honest, I'm struggling here with the highways issues, because we've heard from the resident, we've heard from the applicant, we've heard from the ward member, and yet it doesn't seem as though the proposals that you've got, certainly these 4 items in the report, have been discussed with all of those people. The ward councillor didn't seem to be aware of them, even though he tells us that he's in regular communication with the residents. Where did these 4 proposals come from? Is this the Highways Department looking at the issue and thinking, yeah, this is what we'll deal with it? Or is this the result of consultation with the residents? Because I'm not getting the feel from this discussion that there is a joined up approach between the department, the councillors and the residents in trying to deal with this issue. And that's not meant with any disrespect, Carl, but I just don't feel as though people know what's going on here, really.
No, that's absolutely fine. So when we examined the application, we identified that these measures were required if the development was to be approved, and we did engage with the ward councillors at the time, so that they could liaise with the lead petitioner and the objectors to inform them of those proposals.
Sorry, Chair, if I may, one other technical point, and I'm sorry to be too technical here, Chair, but the first point that you've listed, or that's been listed in the report, Carl, is a residence parking scheme. Now, I understood that you had to have 300 houses or more to qualify for a residence parking scheme. There are not 300 houses on this particular area. What is the exception to this? Are we making an exception because of the issues, or is this, if it's not conditioned, how do we know this is going to happen? Yeah, particularly if the ward councillor doesn't feel it's going to help.
Okay, I can answer that one. So where you're right, normally it must be a minimum of 300 residential properties, but where a request for a scheme doesn't fulfil the criteria above it will not be considered unless the scheme is necessary to address the adverse impact from new developments in a residential area. So it would meet the current criteria.
Okay, and just one final point, Chair, I'm sorry to hog the highways issues. In terms of assuming that the ward councillors and the residents go for this, who's paying for this year on year? Are the residents going to have to pay the annual fee as part of the residence parking scheme, or is this coming out of the grant that we're giving to Tranmere Rovers that we're then going to charge them for the works. I'm not clear on that one, please, Carl. And that's my last question. You'll be pleased to hear.
Okay, no, not a problem. So the set-up fees for the residence parking scheme will be funded by the grant, but the annual permit fees that the residents will be expected to pay, which is currently it's £10 per permit. So you can apply for a permit for however many vehicles that you have registered to your address, and they'd also be eligible for one visitor permit as well. Again, it would be £10 per permit.
Okay, and that scheme will be subject to a different consultation and approval mechanism. Thanks, Ian. Pat Cleary.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Carl. You mentioned there's shared access to the site for vehicles and pedestrians, which makes me a little bit nervous. You say it's okay because of the slow speed of vehicles. Could you just clarify exactly what steps are in place to slow vehicle speeds at that point, and were any alternatives considered to give pedestrians safer access to the site that doesn't conflict with vehicles?
Well, as per condition 11 from the previous applications, arrangements were made to widen the access, and that does conform to standards for a shared access. There is some private signage at the entrance point as well to encourage low speed, but I think by the very nature of the layout of the road, it does induce low speed as people are turning in and turning out of the access. Again, the accident record doesn't exhibit any specific issues at the access point either, which gives us any concern.
Okay, thanks for that. Kathy?
Thank you, Chair. One of my queries as well in relation to the bullet points, as Councillor Lewis alluded to, was the fact that if they can't be conditioned, we don't have any control as to whether or not these measures can be put in place to alleviate parking. And if there's going to be an extra 40 car parking places on the area that's going to be made as a hard standing, I'm not very happy that, as Councillor Cleary pointed out, that there won't be a pavement for pedestrians. There's going to be an awful lot of cars going up and down, and if coaches are dropping off, there are going to be a lot of pedestrians as well. And especially in the evening time, all you need is somebody to step out in front of a car. And although your cars might drive slowly, there's always somebody that doesn't. And there might be, accidents with pedestrians being knocked over. And going back to the residents' parking, I do know in Heswall, Heath Drive residents, there's about 15 of them, and they've got a residents' parking permit scheme, and that was given to them because of the medical centre and the problems with people going to the surgery parking in Heath Drive. So I know that you can have a residents' parking scheme for under 300, and I think it's about £30 a year per household, on the assumption that after the first year, if it's funded by the council's funding 50% towards the 3G pitch, that residents would have to pay for it themselves after that. So I do have some concerns over not being able to condition some of the things that would make your concerns as a highways engineer alleviated, and the fact that for pedestrians coming onto the pitch or walking onto it, that there's no pavement for them. I just think it's a bit dicey not having a pavement. And am I right to assume then that the 4.5 metres, which is wide enough if it's 4 metres minimum for cars to pass there up and down, would there be enough space to have a pavement, even if it's only one side within that space, and have enough space for cars to pass forward and back? Thanks, Carl.
No problem. Well, it's a shared access, so there wouldn't be sufficient width currently to provide a footway within the 4.5 metres that's available there now. But again, there is a pedestrian access point just slightly to the just trying to get my bearings now. So it's to the east of the site access, which you can cut through again to the internal road that links towards the sports pitches. So there is one, but it's slightly offset from the access road, but it does provide linkages to, there's an existing pedestrian crossing there, so again, anyone accessing the site from the community or who arrives by public transport or from Wallasey Village train station would naturally use that existing pedestrian access point.
Okay, thanks for that. Can I just clarify also, so maybe with environmental health or directly with Matthew? Comment was made, I think, by the objector about lighting. Looking at the plans, the only lights I can see as part of the application are around the new pitch. Well, as it was suggested, there might be lighting to the car park area and lighting to the pathway. So what's the situation with the lighting? Is it just the pitch?
Through you, Chair, it is just the pitch. When the petitioner mentioned that, I did contact the case officer to check it, and I was checking on the plans. There are no lights shown on the footpath area or around the car park.
Okay, thanks for that. Any further comments or questions from members? No. Okay. I think I've spotted. I did have similar concern to Pat Cleary and Kathy in terms of the pedestrian access, but I was only looking where the car went in, and Carl is quite right. There is a separate footpath pedestrian access, so I think concerns about shared use there is probably not valid, as there is a genuine pedestrian access. Pat Cleary, another question.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just wanted to bring up what was discussed with the applicant earlier in terms of both the tree planting and the cycle storage. And my question for Matthew is, can we condition either or both of those items to provide replacement tree planting and secure covered cycle storage?
Well, the short answer to that question is yes. It is in the gift of the committee to condition prior to the commencement of the use. I mean, we have a standard condition, as you know, for cycle parking, which we can use, and likewise a landscaping scheme to be submitted if members were so minded.
Thanks for that, Matthew. Well, just based on the comments that the applicant made, I think the applicant would be okay if we did that. So, Chair, if I could, through you, suggest that we do condition both of those items, or at least we put that to the committee.
Yeah, we'll put it to the committee. Steve, yes, we're all open for debate or what. If you want to come in. Steve Foulkes.
Right. Well, I would have give way to Councillor Lewis. You more or less you said any questions, but I'll take it when I've got into open space. Okay, sorry. Yes, Chair. Okay. Obviously, thank you to Mr. Cockcroft and Dawn. I think both put their cases forward very well. I think there's been almost analytical debate and questioning over the application. We've now revealed, as we've gone on, there will be extra car parking developed, which seemed to be an issue. My view is that the 393 mitigation circumstances are those put forward by a professional highways engineer and not, with the greatest respect, amateurs like ourselves. My view is that there are problems with this area now, and I think fully backing Ian Lewis's comment that whatever the decision tonight, there needs to be an ongoing dialogue between residents, ward councillors, Tranmere Rovers, who are one of the big users there, but not the sole user. So the other users as well have to play their part in terms of how this moves forward. I think due consideration has been given. The pitch is actually as far away as it could physically get from residential properties. So I think that has certainly been taken into consideration. And as we know, there is a demonstrable need for 3G pitches, and they are popular and are a great community facility. So I'm very interested in what contributions members have to make. It seems that we may improve matters by the highways engineers' contribution in terms of residents parking. Now again, that will be subject to consultation. We can't force residents parking on people, but if the problems are as bad as people say, then that will be mitigation. And again, just to follow on from Kath Hodgson's contribution, we did have an application around a school which was having a whole form entry coming in, where there was a very localised selected resident parking scheme as part of the mitigation. Unfortunately, it wasn't in my ward, it was in the another ward, but we're working on that. So I think really there seems to be support for the facility and a genuine desire to rectify some of the problems that have developed over what one could argue has been a haphazard development of the site. So the solar complex, going from what its normal use was to bit parts, it's got a checkered history. So my view is that unless there's a really defendable reason at appeal, which would mean us actually going against the advice of our highways engineer and planning officers, then I think I'd just like to hear what other contributions are. But to me, I think it's been a really good debate, a really good planning meeting. And as I say, I'm hoping this is not the end, and it's probably the start of whatever the decision is, that there will be improvements in that area. And I think that's what residents, from what I can pick up, residents want to see that. And I think the development of extra car parking spaces seems to be the key to it to me. It didn't sort of jump out at you throwing the application that the surfacing of that area would release so many extra car parking spaces. And I think there may be solutions down the road as land becomes available, the academy school that's closed, so on and so forth, Links View garage people have mentioned in other correspondence. I think there's potential for us to improve conditions around that area with or without the 3G pitch. But my view is that these are needed facilities and should be welcomed at the moment. But I stay open to persuasion until the final vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Ian, you're next on my list. You want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. And it's a privilege and an honour, as always, to come after Councillor Foulkes. I think Councillor Foulkes has hit the nail on the head, really. I think even Mr. Cockcroft, as the objector, welcomed the use of the site, the development, but rightly highlighted the concerns over parking and highways. I am still concerned that there is a breakdown of communication between the Highways Department, the local ward councillors, the residents, and it's the residents who are going to pay the price for anything that happens, and of course the applicant. I welcome Steve's support for the fact that the four parties need to get together a bit more. And what I would say is that I'm not convinced by the four items that the Highways Department has listed in their report, not least because they've been proposed without any consultation with residents, and I'm not sure residents in Hayes Drive particularly want the thought of having to pay for residents' parking to deal with an application that we're part funding for Tranmere Rovers. So I think it would be fair, Chair, based on what we've done, where precedent has been set at a previous meeting, where there was an application that was overall welcomed, but where we had legitimate concerns over the impact on the immediate neighbours, and that was the issue of Wi-Fi on the Merseyrail network. And I think it was Councillor Whittingham proposed that we defer that item pending discussion between the applicant and the residents and any relevant council officers. And I do feel that, having listened to the debate and listened to what Cllr Cleary has said, what Councillor Hodson said, what Councillor Foulkes has just said, and not least what Mr. Cockcroft and Dawn Tolcher has said, both of whom I think want a solution to these problems, but I'm not convinced that the items that the Highways Department has listed are the solutions. So I would actually be proposing that we defer this item, Chair, to allow the parties to get together and come up with an acceptable plan to deal with the issues that have been highlighted. I don't particularly want to vote against this application, as Councillor Greenie has asked us to, but equally, having heard Mr. Cockcroft, I don't particularly want to vote for it at the moment until all potential avenues have been explored in terms of dealing with the highways and the parking on the site. Thank you, Chair. And I will move deferral subject to what other members have to say.
Okay, I'll come back to you on that then. Pat Cleary.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few additional comments from me, just following on from what's just been said. I think there's clearly an issue around parking. I think we've well established that. There's an issue of antisocial or illegal parking in the area. And I think that reflects, you know, the fact that more broadly we have a lot of illegal and antisocial parking generally, and enforcement comes into play there, which I'm not sure is something that can really be dealt with at all through the confines that we have here within this application. However, I would say there's a couple of things I'm disappointed about. I'm disappointed it's come to this, and the lack of communication point has been made. I'm not going to remake it, but it's entirely valid. I asked the applicant about a travel plan, and really there isn't one. And I think that's something else that Tranmere Rovers can do a lot more on, because parking issues are not just a lack of parking, they're also too many cars. There's two sides to the equation, and we have to approach them from both ends. And increasingly we should be approaching them from the end of discouraging people from driving to the site in the first place. So there were the points I made, but given that what the highways officer has said in the report, I think that does, I'm sure members will be cognizant of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Cathy, I'll bring you in second in a moment. So, does any other members want to make a comment at this point? Okay, I'll bring Ian back just to move his reasons for deferral. I'd just say this, though. I think my view is this: we have had a wide-ranging discussion on this, and I've allowed that, if you like, to take place because the main case is there seems to be a pre-existing issue with traffic and car parking on the site, and a lot of these points probably were raised and discussed at the initial point. I have no recollection of the original planning application, and we have discussed conditions from the previous planning application, and we've discussed the impact of the previous application. I think, unfortunately, you've always got to put your planning committee head on and say we've got to consider the actual application we have in front of us, and the actual application is for one 3G pitch in the furthest corner with floodlighting for the pitch. I'm not convinced that there's reasons for refusal for that. No one has suggested any reasons for refusal. The issues seem to be pre-existing, and they are issues that the ward council has addressed us on, and is clearly in communication with highways officers on. The highways officer is almost for information in 393, telling us what it is they're planning to do in terms of the pre-existing problem with traffic on Leasowe Road and comings and goings. Clearly the applicant and highways officers will have heard the range of our discussion, and the applicant in particular, I think, acknowledged to Ian Lewis that more needed to be done in terms of good neighbourliness of the site. But most of those things, I'm bound to say, in my view, don't impact on the very narrow nature of the actual planning application we have in front of us. That being said, I personally would not be in favour of a deferral to discuss issues that will be, in any event, ongoing in terms of their discussion with ward councillors and the Highways Department. I don't think we have sufficient reasons for that. I think I've got a Cecilia, did you want to advise us on this?
Nothing specific, Chair, just to say that if we were to defer, we'd have to be very clear that the reason for the deferral is for a planning purpose, and that would have to be clearly set out in any motion to defer. and would have to apply to this particular application and not to deal with potentially pre-existing issues.
Okay, so that's my view. Any other members have a view to put on that before I call Ian back? No. Ian, are you minded to me, Steve Foulkes? Sorry, Ian, you're going to have to just wait just 1 second and follow Steve again.
I have been sent information, and I certainly sent it to my members about the engagement the 3 ward councillors have been engaged in, and I do hope at the back of this isn't some sort of ploy to make them look bad, because they've done we all know at the end of the day we all make representations as ward councillors to planning committee, and it's our job to make that decision. I'm aware of the public meeting being set up. I'm aware of letters going around, and I'm been made personally aware of direct visits to numbers of residents from the ward council. So I just want to give a shout for the ward councils having done their job. Eventually it has to come to planning committee to be decided. My view is that I'm siding with you, Chair. I think this one is probably one that is easier to give planning permission to, just for the 3G pitch and all the mitigation that's gone with it. But we'll see how the vote goes on the deferment issue and what the reasons for deferment are.
Okay. Thanks. That's clearly, in addition to the narrow nature of the actual application, a deferment will presumably take it out of time, and we obviously risk appeal for non-determination. As I say, it can be very difficult. Members do want to explore extraneous issues to some planning applications, but just counsel that sometimes the planning committee is not the right forum to attempt to address every problem that pre-exists in an area. Okay, so having said that, no other members have indicated they'd like to speak, so I'll bring Ian back, see whether he has either changed his mind or is moving something.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing me back, and again, thank you to Councillor Foulkes. Partly what I'm moving, Councillor Foulkes, and through you, Chair, is specifically because of the concerns that have been raised by the ward councillors. I'm not in any way trying to make them look bad. I'm trying to support what they've been saying. When you, Chair, read out the 4 listed highways potential solutions, the ward member wasn't aware of those, so I'm really not trying to make the ward member look bad at all. I'm trying to reflect his concerns and Mr. Cockcroft's, and also the desire by the applicant to work with the local community. So I would move, Chair, that committee believes that application 20/0012 will lead to an increase in traffic and parking issues on-site and off-site, and does not believe those issues have been satisfactorily resolved with residents or with the applicant. Committee therefore defers the application pending further discussions between all parties concerned.
Sorry, through you, Chair, that sounds more like a reason for refusal than a deferment to me.
Well, sorry, Matthew, but at the end I did say this application is deferred, not refused. I didn't say refused, I said deferred.
It did sound very much like reasons for refusal.
Sorry, Chair, to enable further discussions to take place between, if we were going to refuse it, there wouldn't be any further discussions. I specifically said to enable further discussions to take place.
I think if it was refused, that the likelihood is further discussions would take place. But nevertheless, it's moved in those terms. Kathy, you'd indicated in chat that you were going to be the seconder.
Yes, I'll second deferment.
Okay. Let me get my... Okay, if members can prepare to vote then. Voting will be for, against, or abstaining on the motion to defer. The solicitor will call your name. Please turn on your camera and microphone and say who you are before voting. Members should only cast a vote if they have heard the presentations and the debate in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems hearing the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called. So I'll just hand over to the solicitor to run the vote.
Right. Thank you, Chair. So this is a vote for, against or abstain in relation to deferral of this matter before the committee. So Councillor Berry.
Councillor Bruce Berry voting for.
Councillor Corkhill.
Councillor Corkhill voting against any deferment.
Thank you. Councillor George Davies. Councillor Davies.
Sorry, yes, it's just I'm having a problem with my mic. I'm okay there now. Yes, against.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Cllr Pat Cleary voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Foulkes.
I'm voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Councillor Sam Frost voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Councillor Mary Jordan voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Surprisingly voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart.
Councillor Paul Stuart voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Whittingham.
Yeah, Councillor Stuart wasn't voting against.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams.
Voting against.
Okay. That's 9 votes against and 4 votes for.
Thanks for that. That motion is lost. Okay, so to give us something to get our teeth into, I will move approval. Now then, let me see. We've got the conditions that are listed. A suggestion was made that we can also use our standard condition on cycling and a standard condition on landscaping. Would anybody object to that being added? Those two being added as conditions 8 and 9. And if nobody objects, is anybody going to second a motion to approve with those 2 further conditions?
Sorry, through you, Chair. I think it's probably just to cover it. If I read those extra 2 conditions, if members are minded to add those so that you know what you're voting on.
Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent. Good idea.
I think that's Matthew, yes.
Okay, so the first one would be a scheme of landscaping proposals, including a timetable of works, shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority prior to first use of the proposed development. The scheme shall include, but not be limited to, full plans and specifications for all hard and soft landscape works, including proposals for replacement tree planting and indications of all existing trees and hedgerows on the land to be retained. All planting in the approved details of landscaping shall be carried out in the first planting season following the completion of the development or prior to the first use of the pitch hereby approved, whichever is the sooner, and any trees, shrubs, hedges or plants which within a period of 5 years from the completion of development die, are removed or become seriously damaged or diseased shall be replaced in the next planting season with others of similar size and species unless the local planning authority gives written consent to any variation. And the reason would be in the interests of visual amenity and the character of the area and to ensure a satisfactory environment having regard to policy GR5 of the Wirral UDP. And the second additional condition would be prior to first occupation of the prior to first use of the development hereby approved. Full details of secure, covered and lockable cycle parking and or storage facilities shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. These facilities shall be provided in accordance with the approved details and made available for use prior to the first use of the development hereby permitted, and shall be retained for use at all times thereafter. The reason being to ensure that satisfactory facilities for the parking of cycles are provided and to encourage travel by means other than the private car, having regard to policy TR12 of the Wirral Unitary Development Plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Pat, Pat Cleary, this was your suggestion. Are those conditions what you had in mind?
That's exactly what I had in mind. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I've moved approval with the 7 published conditions and the 2 conditions just read out by planning officers. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it, no problem.
Okay, thank you. No further indications from members that there's anything further to say, so we will now vote on a motion to approve. So voting will.
Councillor, before you move to vote on that, could I just ask Councillor Williams to turn off her camera before we move to the vote?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think Bruce has just positioned himself to vote. Okay. Okay, members. Voting will be for, against or abstaining on the motion. The solicitor will call your name. Please turn on your camera and microphone and say who you are before voting. Members should only cast a vote if they have heard the planning officer's presentation and the debate in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems hearing the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called. Okay, just one moment. I beg your pardon, Stuart.
Yeah, just a question to Cecilia. During the bit of confusion round when Andy Corkhill seconded your motion, Chair, accidentally downed myself out. But I did listen to the whole debate. Does that preclude me from voting?
I don't think so. We were quiet for a moment. There was no further debate.
I think you heard all the debate, Councillor Whittingham, so I think you're okay to vote. So that's fine.
Okay, so I'll hand over then to the solicitor to run the vote. And when she's running, I'll just remind her that C for Cleary just comes before Davies. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Berry.
Councillor Bruce Berry voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Corkhill.
Councillor Corkhill voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Councillor Cleary voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Councillor Davies voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Foulkes.
Councillor Foulkes voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Councillor Sam Frost voting for.
Councillor Hodson.
Councillor Catherine Hodson voting for.
Councillor Jordan.
Councillor Mary Jordan voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Stuart Kelly voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Cllr Ian Lewis voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart.
Councillor Paul Stuart voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Whittingham.
Yeah, press the right buttons this time. Councillor Stuart Whittingham, I can confirm I had the whole debate voting for.
Right, thank you. And Councillor Williams.
Councillor Williams voting for.
Thank you. That's 10 for and 3 against, Councillor.
10 for and 3 against.
Yes.
That application has been approved. Thanks for everyone's contribution on that. We now move then back to the agenda proper. agenda order proper. Back then to item 3, which is application of William Dodd Builders Merchants, Bermuda Road, Morton. If I can ask the planning officer to introduce their report, please. Okay, you can see the plan.
Okay, thank you through you, Chair. So this planning application is seeking permission for the erection of 14 dwellings across the site following the demolition of the existing buildings. The number of units has been amended from 15 down to 14 and will consist of 10 two-bedroom properties and 4 three-bedroom properties. The site is located within a primarily residential area and is bounded on all sides by residential properties. The removal of the builder's yard will allow for the redevelopment of the site with housing that is more compatible with the character and nature of the area. The site will be accessed via Bermuda Road, and there are no highways objections to the proposed access or road layout. The proposed layout satisfies the Council's interface distances both internally and with regards to their relationship with existing neighbouring properties. The development proposed would remove a non-conforming commercial operation within the primarily residential area and redevelop the site with housing. The development will contribute towards the Council's housing figures and would not impact negatively on the character of the area, which is predominantly residential in nature. The proposals are considered to comply with Policy HS4, New Housing Development, and the provisions of the National Planning Policy Framework, and are recommended for approval. There is no petition in connection with this application.
Okay, it's before us because there were sufficient written objections, 15 objections and 1 letter of support. Open to members. Any questions? Anybody? Yeah, don't feel you have to, Steve, but yes, but by all means, comment.
Just for clarity, Chair, we did discuss at spokesperson's briefing, the question was raised by, not by myself, the reason why there was no affordable housing on the scheme, and it was explained the viability and the treatment of the ground was so that it would have been uneconomical for the development to take place. So just for clarity, with that comment in mind, if that prompts any other comments, I'd be more than happy to move approval for this.
Okay. So any further? Bruce Berry has a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The only concern that I would raise on this development is to do with the culvert system. As you know, the Arrow Brook runs right through this site, and it will be encased into a culvert, which is perfectly fine. But in the proposal, further notes for committee, it says about a permit from the environmental agency, and it says may require a permit. I'd like to have a little bit more reassurance, really, over the permit and also over the 106 agreement. Will there be a 106 agreement in place? But because of the issues that we've had previously in the Morton area, and particularly in Turn Way, which is probably half a mile, 3/4 of a mile further on with the Arrow Brook, I'd like to have some reassurances regarding the flow of the Arrow Brook and to do with flooding issues. And I'd like to know that something is in place for the maintenance, and I take it that's what would be covered by the 106 agreement. Thank you.
Okay, Matthew, are you dealing with that, or is Ian?
No, thank you. Through you, Chair. So there are conditions on that deal with drainage. There's condition 8 and condition 9. And then following on from that, there are, under the further notes to committee, numbers 2 and 3. So they deal with the issue of drainage, not a Section 106 agreement. And the issue of the permit is outside of the planning remit, but it's something that the Environment Agency would wanted highlighting to the applicant as part of any decision moving forward. But it wouldn't be covered under the planning application or the planning permission. It would be under a separate regime, and a separate permit would need to be discussed with the Environment Agency.
Can I just come back in, please, Chair?
Sure.
So, the permit situation would have to be taken up separately with the Environmental Agency. It wouldn't be an automatic assumption that it would happen. So is that standard procedure in a situation like this?
Through you, Chair, we've consulted with the lead local flood authority, and they've raised no objection to this application in terms of drainage or sustainable drainage or flooding, subject to the conditions that I've already set out for members. And just to repeat, it's conditions 8 and 9, and the notes 2 and 3 that are on agenda pages 18 and 19. The Environment Agency, just to be clear, have raised no objection to this application, but they have asked, as part of the decision notice, that the attention of the applicant is drawn to some of their guidance, and that is the purpose of that note that would be attached on the condition on the decision notice. But as I said, it's separate to the planning permission. It doesn't fall under the planning remit.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Bruce. Paul Stuart.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to second Steve Foulkes' move for approval.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I'll take that as a moved and seconded motion. Any other members wish to contribute? Yeah, I think it's a residential development in a residential area, brings into use a site that will probably fall into disrepair in the long run. Steve House correctly reminds us that officers have asked about affordable housing. I think I'm satisfied that there's sufficient land remediation work that would make that very difficult, and in any event it doesn't qualify as a major development under the national planning framework. So we have a motion to move, which is seconded. No other members are indicating, so I shall move to the vote on that then. So voting will be for, against or abstaining on the motion to approve. The solicitor will call your name. Please turn on your mic and camera and say who you are before voting. Members should only cast a vote if they've heard the planning officer's presentation and the debate in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems hearing the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can call on Councillor Bruce Ferry.
Yeah, Councillor Bruce Ferry voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Corkhill.
Andy Corkhill voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Pat Cleary voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Councillor George Davies voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Foulkes.
Councillor Steve Foulkes voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Councillor Sam Frost voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson.
Councillor Catherine Hodson voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Councillor Mary Jordan voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Stuart Kelly voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Ian Lewis voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart.
Councillor Paul Stuart voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Whittingham.
Councillor Stuart Whittingham vote for.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams.
Councillor Irene Williams voting for.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. That application is approved. We'll move on now to item 4, Ward Lane, Heswall, and I'll ask the plan officer to introduce that report. And we can see the plan on the screen.
Okay, thank you through you, Chair. This planning application seeks permission for the erection of stables and associated facilities for private use. There have previously been stables on this site but have since been demolished. The proposals have also been amended to bring forward a single-storey building as opposed to a taller structure originally proposed. The stables proposed have also been relocated to minimise impact on the openness of the greenbelt. The menage is also proposed alongside the stables and is also for private use. The proposals are considered to be appropriate facilities within the greenbelt and there will be no adverse impact on any protected sites or species. The application is recommended for approval and there is no petition in connection with this application.
Okay, thanks for that. It's before us because 15 individual objections came forward. Any comments from members? Kathy?
Oh, I was just going to write, can I speak? Yeah, just to say, I don't have any objections to this application. Once debate is finished, I'll be happy to move approval.
Okay, thanks for that. If it helps, I'll second the motion. So, any comment on members on a motion to approve? No, fairly straightforward. Everything's in the report. Okay, so if we can prepare then to vote.
Councillor Kelly, sorry, can Councillor Williams turn off a camera?
Sorry.
Done it again with the camera. Right.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, voting will be for, against or abstaining on the motion to approve. The solicitor will call your name. Please turn on your camera and microphone and say who you are before voting. Members should only cast a vote if they've heard the planning officer's presentation in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems hearing the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Bruce Berry.
Councillor Bruce Berry voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Corkhill.
Andy Corkhill voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Pat Cleary voting for.
Thank you. Councillor George Davies.
Councillor George Davies voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Foulkes.
Councillor Steve Foulkes voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Councillor Sam Frost voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson.
Councillor Catherine Hodson voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Councillor Mary Jordan voting for.
Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Stuart Kelly voting for.
Councillor Lewis.
Ian Lewis voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Stewart.
Councillor Paul Stewart voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart Whittingham.
Councillor Stuart Whittingham voting for.
And Councillor Williams.
Irene Williams voting for.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thanks for that. That was unanimous. That application has been approved. And that concludes our meeting tonight. Excuse me. Thank members. Thank